Let's welcome back for his third time here speaking at Clark College, Mr. Peter Ramsing.
That wasn't fake claps, that sounded sincere. I'll take it. Yeah, so I'm Peter. At the very top of my slide deck is a URL that if you want to ask questions, you're more than welcome to, although it's like only 2 laptops out. This worked really well at OSU when they're all on Facebook and they could do this at the same time. But at the same time, please just ask questions throughout the entire thing. The gist of the slides and my monologue is to prompt questions, not to necessarily solve the world's problems. But once you guys get your questions in, I can answer them, and that's just, yeah, for the last 3 years, that's how it's rolled, or I guess last 2 years, and we'll see if the this one works the same way. So either there, or just raise your hand and or just scream at me. That's how to get a hold of me. That's my site, peter.coffee. Yes, I bought the peter.coffee top level domain. That's my Twitter, and usually just about anywhere else, GitHub is Peter Ramsing. Or if you want to shoot me an email, that is me at peterramsing.com. Fun fact, you will not get a reply from that email. You'll get a reply from my actual email. So, I'm a developer. I will stay on here and do an intro. I'm a developer. XPO Logistics is the company I work for. I'm on specifically the LTL side here in Portland. If you're familiar with logistics or freights, we do trucks from point A to point B. Many thousands of them a day. We're huge. I have done the transition all the way from small tiny startup to medium-sized company to a little bit larger company, and now there's over 100,000 of us, and I don't think that includes contractors, and there's a lot of contractors. So many thousands of developers that I'm engaging with, not necessarily specifically, but it's definitely been a transition. So that's me, that's my background a little bit. I guess I'll explain how I got my start, because sometimes that's interesting. I did not start wanting to write software. I just like solving problems. I always had an affinity for computers, so it kind of makes sense a little bit. Certainly didn't surprise my parents, but I worked at Starbucks, and I was a barista, and the way we split tips was a little bit arduous. It was basically on paper. You pencil, pen, paper, and I'm sitting here going, this is inefficient, and wow, every store does this. So I made a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet was hard to take to the bank, and at this point, I'm just like, I needed to start writing code to put it on an iPhone. Because iPhones, make an iPhone app. Well, I didn't make an iPhone app. I made a PHP web app because that's what one of my customers said I should start doing, and that's honestly how I got started writing code, just solving problems. And it, next thing led to the next thing, led to a job offer over the pastry case at Starbucks, led to me going, oh, hey, this is actually a thing I can get paid to do. And that's how I started writing software. So that's my origin story. Any questions before we move on?
By software, you mean like apps or just websites?
Specifically, I am a front-end web developer. I can write back-end, can do APIs, but specifically, that's kind of just where I fell into. Now, I mean, me personally, I do write apps. I mean, my split tip app that I made to do the splits or the tips and splitting them, that was a full front-end, back-end app, and I have a couple of products out there that some teams use, all kind of like, I built this thing for you, and it's a thing, yay! But that is, APIs and this and that, and so I've done the full gambit, done database administration, done project management, I've kind of done it all, but my specialty is front end, my specialty is grids in particular. I do a lot of CSS layout, Internet Explorer work, so that's kind of where I've fallen into. I've written a few native apps, but that's definitely not my specialty. However, apparently I write my JavaScript like Java, and I make a lot of Java developers happy, so apparently I'm also a Java developer. But yeah. So, well, the title is a day in the life, or continuous adventures in the life of a front-end web developer. So, one thing that based on just questions over the past few years, sometimes it seems like I get asked, well, so what are you actually doing? Like, who is a developer in the real world? This is a little diagram showing kind of who you might engage with as a developer, and whether you're a native developer, you'll engage with the rest. Whether you're a DBA, you'll engage. If your company's small, this will be one person. If your company's huge, each of these will be a team of 180 people or more. I'm being facetious there a little bit, but you get my drift. We've got native developers, iOS or Windows, or Mac, applications. Design and art. What does it look like? How should it look? What should the look and feel be? How does it make you feel? Integration and ops. This can be everything from, well, we have APIs in the back end and the front end needs to talk to them. How do we do that securely? How do we deploy our code? Well, we have people in China and they can't hit our CDN. Do we get a CDN there? Integration ops. BA, business analyst, people that actually work on creating the specifications that you need to build against. And again, I'm putting titles out here, but this is kind of a general overview. Different companies will have this person be the Superman. Our integration in ops has a fancy name, so take this with a grain of salt, but these are kind of just the general people that you're going to engage with or the general roles that you'll engage with. Then there's me, front-end web. We do the things like, hey, this, it's in a web browser and it's pretty. That's what we do. Server side, well, ultimately this is coming from somewhere and there's APIs that are supporting this page. That has to be written by someone, and so that's usually a different set of languages, although JavaScript, which is a familiar language to most front-end web developers, is starting to go server-side. And definitely at any point, if I'm saying languages or terms like JavaScript or Java, that's wait, I've heard, but what? Raise your hand or yell at me and stop me and I will explain. Trying to stay away from techno lingo, because sometimes that can get weird reactions. No, okay.
So server side, you mean Node?
Node is definitely server side. Yes. Also, yeah. To answer the question, yeah, Node would be server side, and that's JavaScript on the server. But Java, PHP, Ruby, Python, those are server side things. In general, you have front end, which you could call client side. That's what runs in the browser, but ultimately that's calling into something to either get the page, get data, things like that, and that would be the server side, however you want to write it. I'm sure you could write it in whatever language if you wanted to get clever and creative. Managers, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? How are you doing it? How fast are you doing it? Are you working on the weekend or not working on the weekend? My manager has a good habit of telling me to not work on the weekends, but still go fast. That's balance. So you work with managers and DBA data and things of that sort. DBA data kind of being okay, we have all this information because our customers use our software. What are they actually doing? Or a combination of, our data needs to be efficient and we need to get that data out. The server needs to get it and it needs to be fast. And that's kind of things that DBAs do, because table allocations, and that's hard. And you definitely, Bruce, have a lot of experience beyond this. So I'm curious if you have any additional thoughts or any additional questions here before I go to my last.
Customer. Oh.
Next slide.
Yeah.
Over all that though, QA. I put it up in the corner not to minimize it, but to it's the asterisk. Over all of this, well, how do we know it's working? The key is every single thing you write has a quality assurance team. The real kicker is you don't want your quality assurance team to be your customers. So you're usually dealing with quality assurance at some point. Maybe it's internal and you yourself are doing a QA. And specifically, basically, QA does, they look at what the business rules are for whatever you're working on. It should look like this, and it should act like this, and they do that thing and validate whether or not it actually does the thing. Then usually they will try to insert some script in and break it, and when it does, they say it's broken. If you do this weird thing, you say, really? That's not actually gonna happen in the real world, but they look at you and they give you that look and you say, fine, and you fix it, and you send it back to them and you're happy at the end of the day because it solved the problem. So that's QA. Questions or additional people that I might be missing? Yeah. In theory, yeah, definitely. Actually, you know what? Yeah, we have an information security team that I could just keep adding things on here. Ultimately, kind of my thought, that's usually in the DBA data side of things. But yeah, no, that's a really, really good good thought. Yep, security at every single point. I mean, right now I'm trying to introduce getting some logging, and I want some data on a third-party service, and I'm having to write reports on what are they going to do to it, how do we make sure that it's secure, what happens if they get hacked, what happens to our customer, and yeah, so no, thank you for bringing that up. Anything else I'm missing? Please teach me. So who do I work for? Our customers. You as students have a customer. That customer is Bruce. Bruce is your customer. He tells you what to do, and when you make him happy, you're happy. In the real world, you have paying customers. They're the ones that actually are paying for your service. In my realm, that's the people that say, I'd like my product from point A to point B. Here's my money, take it and do the thing. And that's one of my customers. The other customer I have is marketing. Marketing is going to make sure that I'm making my site look the right way, that it represents our company well. They're a customer of mine. Ourselves, this is the one that is kind of forgotten when I kind of talk with teams. So hopefully when you're starting out, I can impress this upon you. Yourself as a customer. If you're not writing code that you like, that is easy to maintain, that when you release the code, you can sleep the next day because it's out in production. If you're not thinking of yourself as a customer, writing maintainable and safe code, you're going to be in a world of hurt, just as if you forgot about your paying customers. Or if you forgot about the political pressures, which might be your CEO saying, I like the color blue this week, so make it blue. Oh, we just made it green. Yeah, I want it blue. They're your customers. And we can get into political things later, and the asterisk there is, no, not those politics, the politics at work. And political things are real in whatever size company you're in. But yeah, there's political pressures. They say do this, and you have to say, well, how high do we jump? Sales team. Ultimately, you need to make sure that you keep having paying customers, or you make it easy to acquire more paying customers. So the sales team is definitely a customer as well that we deal with. Anyone else that I might be thinking, or is this prompting, or any questions? Yes? Am I boring people yet? Man, I'm feeling like giving more of a lecture style.
Well, check the questions. Let's see if...
Ooh, good call, good call. Any questions? Hey, is this thing on?
That had to be Casey.
No, it's me.
Oh, nice.
I don't know. Is it on? No, it's not on. Okay.
Recheck that question.
Wait. Yes. Anyway.
Oh, neat.
All right. So these are the people that in my real day I'm engaging with. Where do we work? Okay, so I've been in all sorts of different types of companies. Actually, I think I've basically done all these. But there's a combination of companies. Startups is what you all hear about. They can be small, they can be large, they can be Facebook, they can be not Facebook. Yourself, you can work for yourself as a contractor. I'm just these are kind of all obvious, but worth mentioning and potentially prompt some questions. If you're curious about how to get into any of these. Small business, you could think of, hey, we've been around for 10 years, we're financially solid, but we're only 10 people. Medium, maybe 100. Huge, maybe 100,000, and maybe you're a contractor working for a company that's 150,000, but you're farmed out to a company that's only 20 people. That's a completely different thing. And then the other thing that is worth mentioning here is being a contractor, but being in a company and you aren't working for the company that you're actually being paid by, you're working for another company. That's actually something that I've done several times. Actually, at my current company, I did not work for XPO, but I had an XPO laptop. I went to the XPO offices every day. I had an XPO email. All I did was XPO. And the only thing that I did at my other company was submit a timesheet. I did that for a number of months until finally XPO said, yes, we like this guy. And they converted me, or no, they converted my position. There's technical terms here. They converted my position to a full-time position, then I became an employee of XPO. So that's an interesting way to get in, and actually very common these days. So you'll humorously not be like, well, I'd love to work for HP. Great, you're gonna work for subsidiary company of some huge conglomeration, and your office is at HP, you're writing HP code, but you have no paycheck coming from HP. But it's a great way to go, because not only do you get to try out the company, they get to try out you. Which is also hard then when you get the email saying, don't come into work. That's awkward. Any questions here? Any thoughts?
So you did all of this in just a couple of years?
Yep.
That's a lot.
Apparently I get around. I did move, so it kind of it pushed some of it. But yeah, I've worked. I've done kind of the two of the huge. I've done Starbucks, which I wasn't writing software for, but I did start getting into some of the software realm there. XPO is huge, absolutely huge and global. I've done two startups. I did a healthcare startup of about 20 people, and I did medium-sized startup. I think we peaked at about 35, 40. I've done small business where it was quite literally a mom and pop, and myself and one other developer, and off and on a few other people. I've done medium. I think we about 70 people, and then I worked. Is that it? Am I missing one? No, that's it. And huge. And then contracted ultimately throughout all this. When I moved up to Portland, I did contract for a while where I was farming myself out to companies and kind of doing the all by myself gig. So that was yourself working for myself, and then being farmed out as a contractor. I did that with 2 other companies. Yeah, and I guess I work for myself. I mean, I think that's actually that's an important thing. Lots of times at work, I can't do the things I want to do because I have to do the things that my boss tells me to do. And most of the time that those align, and if you have a good manager, those will align. But at the end of the day, I go home and I write code that I really like, or that I want to play with. Or how can I tell my boss, I want to play with this thing that we'll probably never use, but I'd love to. Can you give me 2 days to do it? And looking at you, no, of course not. I mean, it depends, but you do that at home. So you're always working for yourself, which ultimately leads you to hopefully be doing some open source work, which we can get into. Open source, we'll get there. Open source is awesome, and I do a ton of that, which ultimately gets me a lot of the work that I do. And lots of times I'm actually literally paid to sit on conference calls to give input or thoughts because they see my open source projects. So working for yourself, even when you're working for the man, is awesome. Thoughts, questions, concerns? Yeah.
Where's XBO located?
Everywhere. My office specifically is located in Slabtown, kind of by 23rd Street in Portland. But we've got offices everywhere, lots of East Coast offices, but ultimately we're a logistical company, so we have offices all over the world. And if you want it in the middle of Alaska, we will be there in the middle of Alaska for you. So, does that answer the question? Or were you, okay. Yeah.
Can you explain your open source coding that you do?
Are you all familiar with GitHub?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anyone not familiar with GitHub? Nudge your neighbor and they'll say it for you. Okay, cool. All right. If you're not familiar with GitHub, you can talk with your professor because it's amazing, and it's also Halloween. I'm not writing as much right now, mainly because I've just been really, really busy, and I've been doing a lot of the high level. As we were kind of joking before the class, we'll see how many years I have writing code. I keep kind of not writing code these days, doing a lot more, not managing, because I'm definitely not managing, but doing more input, right? Like showing people how they might write code. But specifically, Lost is the open source project I do a lot of work on. I know I'm behind on my issues. I keep looking at that notification bar and getting embarrassed that I haven't gotten here yet. But this is a grid framework which allows front-end developers to build out grids of 6 if you wanted, or 1 and 2, and you can offset things, you can nest things. And the syntax is really, really simple. If you want to do a grid like this, you can make it, and this is responsive, so if I do this, you can see that it'll break down. It responds like such, and the syntax is pretty cool, like such. And we can get into the details, but this is ultimately what I do. It's pretty widely used. Let's see, what are we at? 75,000 downloads a month. What I do for it, it's a pretty stable thing, so I'm not doing a huge amount of development. That's why it's kind of a little bit scattered. But I do all the coordination of what we're doing, which features we want to use, introduce, what features we don't. Ultimately, my hope is that Lost Grid becomes completely pointless once CSS Grid is, CSS Grid is totally a thing, but once we don't have to support older browsers, I would love to never have to support this. But ultimately, I will, because many websites are using it, and actually, it's based on, you can either do a flex. I'm getting into like super technical words, we can dive into it, but there's float layout grids where you're using like float left or float right, and then there's flex grids where you can use flexbox to reorder things, and then there's CSS grid where you're able to make amazing and very complex grids with very little syntax. Ultimately, float grids work in Internet Explorer. Flexbox falls over a lot in Internet Explorer, so there's a lot of reasons why customers are using Lost Grid to support their legacy applications. For instance, my team, we have to support Internet Explorer 11, and oftentimes I'm relying on float grids because Flexbox just doesn't work. It's a hard challenge, but that's why people like Lost Grid, because it's using really, really old code and you can do very complex things with it. As a note, I did not initially write this. I've ultimately rewritten the entire thing. Corey Simmons was the original architect of this. And like 4 years ago, it got handed off to me, and I've since added a bunch of features and rewritten the entire thing. But just as a caveat to Corey, he's an incredible grid scientist, and he did most of the math research on this. I can't take credit for that, but I can take credit for building it into what it is and being able to support it. And there's huge companies use this. You can via NPM, you can figure out who's using it, but yeah, it is pretty cool. So I don't know if that necessarily answers the question, or if it just sounds like I'm bragging, but and ultimately, here's the paperwork. Like, hey, people want things changed. So this is someone saying, hey, I would like to make this change, and here's the reasoning for it, and here's the files that they changed. Ooh, actually, that's a good change. And if I was logged in, I could approve this, and it would plop in to master, and we release a new version. People submit issues, and I have to maintain these issues. As you can tell, I haven't been keeping up on these as much as I should. But again, I work for free on this, so who's to say I even need to? So lots of these are people either asking for support or customers that, or I say, I call them customers, so I'll call them customers, but people wanting different things. And then ultimately, we generate releases that people bring into their projects. They do it via NPM. Again, and probably going over some heads, but we can definitely dive into specifics if there's more specific questions that we want to ask. Does that answer the question of kind of what I do open sourcey?
Yeah.
I do also, there's a ton of other projects that I contribute to. Here's some, these are tools that I'm building that I use. I use their tools for me. Other people could use them, other people could contribute to them, and I kind of just do them out in the open because it'd be fun. Here's if you want to do this. I was chatting with you, Bruce, about this, but it's basically a Watson/Alexa gift finding app, and so all this stuff is quote unquote open source. It's out in the world, anyone can see it, but specifically Lost is an example of building an open source project. But I've contributed to Angular a little bit, mainly documentation, and actually I'll make that a caveat. Never be afraid of going into a huge project and reading the documentation and being dissatisfied, because you can fix it, and you should fix it. Most documentation these days for code is all done by GitHub, and you can submit pull requests to change it. And you'd be amazed when you're reading code or reading documentation that there's spelling errors. And what a great way to learn the process of pull requests. And I can't tell you how hard it is to onboard a developer, and you say, hey, can you create a pull request? And they go, oh, what? The GitHub or GitHub is a tool that we use a lot. GitLab is another one, and not SourceTree. There's another one from Atlassian that's skipping my head. But basically, it's Git, and it's a storage of code in a web system. Is everyone sort of familiar with Git? You want a quick explanation of what Git is? Tough crowd. Unless. Hey! All right, we'll get there. I just was curious if it was someone asking what Git was. Yeah, getting familiar with Git flow. It's invaluable. That's one of the first questions I'll ask in interviews, and it's hey, have you engaged in the GitHub process, or just merging pull requests, or asking questions, or doing code reviews, and so. Going through that process, contributing something to Google where you have to sign a CLA, paperwork, and doing that and learning how to do that paperwork and coordinating those things, and hey, great, this looks like a great change, but we've made other changes. Can you rebase your change off of this? And you're sitting there, how do I do that? And you Google it and you figure it out and you do it, and you have if you are contributing to a project, you're ultimately literally saying, hey, here's a free cup of coffee. Do you want me to put some creamer in it? You're not going to get mad at me, are you? No, of course you're not. And that's what you're doing when you're contributing to a project. So it's a great way to have really experienced developers help you because you're ultimately helping them. And if you ever have anyone get really, really mad at you or write a bad code review, just mention me and I'll go in and take care of it.
And we're going to be covering Git and GitHub in this class in about 2 weeks.
Nice.
Yeah.
Anyway, highly encourage it, and please, help wanted is a tag that everyone should be looking into if you want to get started on stuff. If you basically just search let's see, there we go, issues with, all of these things are things that you can usually find in, there's different tags you can click on tag, and there's actually, I think there's like a page that GitHub fosters that has issues with help wanted on it. You can be writing websites for cancer research and helping with those. And some of them are super simple. Hey, we need this background color to be green. Well, that's simple. Well, it wasn't, there's this project managers on here trying to get things done, and their team is totally busy rewriting this other piece and they need the background color changed, and you could do it and help cancer research. This is a thing that GitHub offers. And you get that experience and it's great, but oftentimes it's documentation where you get started. And that's how I've gotten started.
And they're owned by Microsoft now.
And they're owned by Microsoft, which is actually doing some pretty cool things with it. Back to that question. Let's take a look. How long does it typically take for code to get approved in a larger or medium-sized company? Hey, buddy, pull request, I slacked it to you. Cool, thank you. 5 minutes later, it's good. So, however, if buddy is away, then it might be until the next day. But now that's our code. So that's our front end code, which is pretty resilient, and we can go really, really fast on it. There's actually back end code. Sometimes you're messing with an API, and if you're familiar with APIs, no, maybe so. Okay, so basically, like here's my schema. I want here's my object, and it looks like this, and I send said object to the back end, and it replies with an object. If you are potentially changing what that object should look like and what the response object should look like, again, are we somewhat? Okay, cool. Yep. If you're changing that pending how big the company, you might actually have to go through a formal process, where it's like, gavel, like, hear ye, welcome to the organization to figure out what our schema looks like, documentation meeting of people that are really cool and are under-caffeinated. We bring to order with the first agenda item to change the schema for this API. All in favor, say aye. Aye, aye, aye. All opposed? We will now approve this schema change, and it will be in next month. So you could have some things like that.
Or you create a new version number.
In lots of, we have a lot of internal APIs that we're relying on internally. Version number, like, that's let's start talking version numbering in a good coffee, probably wine session later. But yeah, you can increment a version and break things. But we have. Sometimes you have APIs between applications that aren't kind of RESTful APIs, but are actually proxies. And sometimes those take a long time to get changes because you have to kind of get approval from everyone in the chain. So it really does matter. However, for smaller projects or for front end things, it does depend on the project. But ultimately, as long as the code is good, it's a matter of clicking a few buttons. Unless there's lessons to be learned in the code, which is amazing. I'll sidebar on this a moment. I'm sure Bruce will give you something similar to this. In code review, I remember my first code review. It was awful. This person said, "Hey, why don't you name it like this? It might be a little bit more clear." My heart was broken. I wrote bad code. Oh my gosh, I'm a failure. What am I actually doing with my life? I should probably just go back to slinging coffee, which actually is, I'm not trying to degrade slinging coffee. I actually miss it and sometimes want to quit and go back to it. Code review is for you to learn. I do a lot of code reviews, and a lot of my code reviews are suggestion-based. Hey, you could potentially do this, or have you thought about this, or this, it might be faster doing this. Don't forget about this. And it's an amazing place to learn, and you should always think about it learning. And it's my favorite thing now to have people review my code and have it be a really, really long list of changes that they might suggest or questions that they might have. Sometimes it's actually at this point it gets you're sitting there going, oh, when when I do ask, hey buddy, can you approve my code review? And within 30 seconds, it's done. Yeah. Well, that wasn't any fun. I didn't learn anything. So an encouragement for those getting code review, if it's totally chock full of changes, that's awesome. It's lessons to learn. And to be perfectly honest, you will write code that makes sense to you that will not make sense to you tomorrow. When you have someone else look at your code and it doesn't make sense to them, and they're making suggestions, suddenly tomorrow it'll make sense to both of you and Freddie, who hasn't seen it. So thoughts on code review. What's the pay across different size businesses you work for? Good question. I don't want to ostracize anyone and use real numbers, but I mean.
Is it consistent?
No, definitely not. I started out, should I just use real numbers? I mean, you're asking real questions. It's on YouTube, it gets a few views. I started out at $17 an hour, and I was barely worth that. I had tons of learning to do. And then I got $30K a year, and then slowly worked my way up from there. Medium-sized companies definitely had a little bit more leeway in when I said I wanted more money. They said they were able to say yes. Larger companies, humorously enough, they will offer you a bunch at the start, and then you have to work your way up from there. Because once you're in, you're gonna get the small ones. Bigger companies, especially right now, though, bigger companies have the capital to offer huge numbers to get you in, because right now. It's a buyer's market. No, it's a seller's. Thank you. It's a seller's market. There it is. Software developers are not a diamond. I am failing at my. Hold on. Better. You, as a software developer, are in the driver's seat when it comes to your job. When I was working to get the job at XPO, had 4 offers on the table. The instant that I got an offer that I liked, I called the others and said, "Sorry, I'm looking into this other offer." One of them, I jokingly said, well, it's a little bit longer of a commute. We'll buy you a BMW. A what? No, we'll buy you a BMW. Whatever BMW is, just add that to your yearly salary. Wait, you'll buy me a BMW every year? Yeah, whatever you want, we'll get you. I'm not saying I'm cool, but it's that's kind of the situation. But once you're in, you're kind of, it's going to be slowly going up. Humorously enough, anyway, yeah, money, sensitive subject. I won't say funny stories. So maybe that answers the question, but ultimately, right now, it's definitely the market for the developer.
Startups?
So here's the funny thing. Some startups will offer you a ton of money, and then will kind of renege on it. I sort of had this happen to me. It was kind of more accidental, but big number was mentioned. Actual number was much less than that. And you're like, what happened? So just, they were money issues, and things were tight. And actually, I've had a check bounce, and so I've had situations like that. But some startups, if they're well funded, they're just throwing money. So it really depends on what their financial situation is. Caveat to startups, I've gotten this all the time. We'll pay you a measly sum now with a huge pay increase later, and we'll give you a bunch of stock options. If you're a bachelor or bachelorette living with your parents and don't have to pay rent, and you can totally do that and take the risk, go for it. If you have to, actually survive, I don't know. I'm not a risk taker. I'm not a risk taker at all. So this is kind of, take my be careful stock options with a grain of salt. Just because there's so many companies out there like, hey, we'll be great, but if you're truly behind it and you're like, you know what, I'll take the risk, go for it. But stock options are, they can be misleading. I literally, in theory, had a job offer of many hundreds of thousands of dollars a year because stock options, and I'd get more, and that was based on their valuation, and it was all great, and I was and I signed the dotted line, and here we go. And to exercise them, the taxes would be outrageous, and ultimately the value of the company was nowhere near what they. So startups can be a little bit hit or miss. I think the best advice I have for you is for me and my wife, we have a number. Basically, if it's above this number, I'll accept it. If it's something I want to do. Ultimately, the company that said, hey, BMW, whatever, we'll give you whatever you want to come here within reason. It was humorous. I jokingly said, well, this number might sway me. And they said, we'll do that plus 10. I was like, that's awkward. It's really awkward. That was supposed to like blow everything out of the water and for you to realize I'm not coming. But okay. But I said no still because it was above the number that me and my wife agreed to. And I wanted to do this work better. So that if anything, that's what has worked for me. There's been no stress, and money then doesn't become that big of a thing. Sometimes it is, big numbers are nice. But you know what? Big numbers just mean more complications. And I don't mean to imply, oh, I'm rolling in it. I'm comfortable, but it's Portland, right? The advice I think I have is you're going to mess up the first few times. You're going to go to a company that, man, I should have dodged that bullet, but you don't know until you're in. And to be perfectly honest, the warning signs, I can't really tell you. I could, if the CEO is bickering with their COO, oh, that's a red flag. Well, maybe it's not. But maybe for you, you've noticed that, and there's things that I've noticed. I'll go into interviews, I'll ask that, I've got my questions that are for me, and I can share, questions, I suppose. But ultimately, it's gonna be working for a few companies, feeling the pain, and learning what you can and can't deal with. Because for me, I can't deal with, oh, you jerk, you wrote terrible code. That's not for me. But some people thrive in that environment, and so that's why it's like it really depends on what you can do and what your threshold of pain and suffering is and where that is. Some people can totally love a disorganized organization. Other people need it perfectly organized and every tag on every ticket to be perfectly labeled and everything to be in the proper case. And that's for you to decide. And it's gonna be some pain and suffering and going to a job and going, and not doing it. And so maybe that helps, maybe it doesn't. But at that point, it makes it really easy to not really care about the numbers because you know what you can and can't handle. And to be perfectly honest, most of the time your salary, and if you hate the work and are doing tons of it doesn't matter what you're being paid. You're ultimately ended up getting paid a couple bucks an hour if you're doing 60, 70, 80 hours a week. So be cognizant of that. Thoughts, questions, concerns? Yes, question and answer went and got us off track. I love it. Type of work. Here's something that got a lot of questions at OSU. So here's to hoping it spawns a lot of questions here. You might be building the product. Facebook. Their product is, well, okay. I won't get into their product is something else. Their product is relationships or friendship. But okay, fine. You're a software developer building the product that is ultimately being sold. You might be doing research. Blockchain research is a huge thing now that no one's making money on and isn't seeing the light of day, but companies are researching it. So you might be working on research. You might be supporting the team, building tools to support the team. We literally have a team. Their name is Go Faster to allow us as developers to go faster. They're writing software for us as developers to engage with our software tools within our organization. You might be selling the product. Think Columbia Sporting Goods. You're writing the sites and tools to help sell products. You might be supporting the product, building tools to working on the customer relations for Columbia when your zipper only goes up halfway and you're confused by it. You might be working on those tools. Or as we've kind of dove into, you might be working on open source. And potentially open source within your company. That's something I'm doing a lot of right now at XPO, where we have tools that we've open sourced within our organization for people to contribute to and work with and utilize in their teams. And we've got teams all over the world, and they're all using different tools, and so we're trying to centralize some of these, and open source is the way we're doing it. So you might be doing external open source like LostGrid, or like Google has Angular material or Angular or things like that, or Facebook's React. Those are open source projects that company is working on that they're externalizing.
Peter, I don't have my device here, but where do the developers store their open source projects within the company? Is it private GitHub repos or is it an internal Git repository?
All the above.
Okay.
Most Git storage solutions have an on-premise solution, and some companies use on-premise, some companies just use github.com with private repositories. It can be all sorts of things, but again, using Source Tree is Atlassian's interface to it. Bitbucket, there it is! Those are kind of the three big ones. You got Bitbucket, GitLab, and GitHub, and Any others? Now that I'm thinking about it, I haven't really. Maybe, I don't know. But those are the 3 big ones that I can think of off the top of my head. So you'll probably be using one of those services. And if you're not, why? Are you not using Git? Are you using SVN or something like that? Any questions? Comments? Concerns?
Oh, they'll have plenty at the end, I promise you.
Whee! We can get into all sorts of things. This is your open, free session of, wait, what's this thing that you said? I'm curious about it. There's no questions.
Yep.
Yeah.
What project are you working on right now?
I just got transitioned. This is downside of working for a public company. I have to be like slightly sensitive to what I say, so let me double check. I'm working on tool. My team works on our external facing application. So within XPO, we have a less than truckload service, and I work on this. So anything that we're doing external facing. So we have tons of internal tools. The internal tools are unreal. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in my building, and they're all working on these internal tools, and it's funny just to expose these like tiny little pages, it seems, compared to everything else we're working on. But these are what I built. So tracking a shipment will continue as a guest. You can track shipments. You could get a rate if you wanted to, and I build these tools. So me and my team do this. So hey, what would it be? 972. Where's the zip code?
33496.
Cool. And we'll ship something of class 60, and it's 7,000 pounds. And it's gonna be residential. And am I a robot? Nope. Ta-da! That's what I built.
Jeez.
7,000 pounds, that's heavy.
It's still.
Well, how far is that? That's that's Florida. Oregon to Florida? And it'll take, we don't show how long it'll take. Oh yeah, it does, 6 days. So that's actually a really good price. It's a really good price.
All right, book it, go.
Cool, sorry. But yeah, so these are the tools that I work on. Yep.
So just the front end, Peter?
Just the front. Well, now my team does all the back end as well. Like we build, and actually, so if you want to integrate, you can.
Can you decompose that page for us and tell us the various things that are behind the glass right there?
Let's do it.
All right.
Cool thing about this is all this is public, so I don't have to feel very bad about doing any of this. Let's do some network requests, shall we? All right, 97. Oops. Well, yeah, 97222. New lock. Cool. There's an API call right there. Boom. Hey, that's bad. Unable to fetch the state or country based on the input you
Too
provided.
many numbers.
Yeah.
Give me the numbers. Hey, that's a thing. So there's an API call. At any point, questions, concerns, comments, or you're like, hey, that's interesting.
Keep going.
Cool. We'll do another API call here. State is Alaska, and the city is Juneau, not plus Juneau. All right, as you can see, hey, API calls. Bringing back things. We'll use that postal code. Component-wise, so we're an Angular shop. I don't think that's any secret. We've got multiple components. We have a component here for the requester. We have another component for shipment. And these are all kind of parceled out. I think, and actually each of these, this from and the to, is also a component. And if I was logged in, I would get a completely different interface here from the from, because I might be selecting an account, so I don't need to actually stipulate where it's from. When is it shipping to? Here's another app that we can hit if I want to calculate the density of things. I can turn on dimensions. This then is stowed in this computer to say whenever I come here, I want to always see dimensions. So we're doing that. Now I'm in, because it's small enough, I'm in kind of small responsive mode. But this is not going to break out of responsive mode if I do this. Yay, small computers or small screens. Just some drop downs. We use Angular material as our interface. So this is basically just an option within HTML, but it has some fun styling that gets put on top in JavaScript. Just simple checkboxes and inputs. Is this kind of what you're cool? Each of these is then going to get validated. So if I put in a class and a weight of 900 and a quantity of 8,928, it's going to let me know. So we're validating real time. We're checking it, and as you notice, once I started typing in, all those went red because now they're required. So we'll do 8,992 is our quantity. That's a lot of one thing. And I can specify my length in inches. And we're going to validate this in real time. So if I do 900, it's going to fail on me. If I do 90, it'll let me know. And I can do the same here. So I'll do 50 and 50.
Validation in the browser or
yes.
the server?
Yeah, we do both. Because ultimately, what's actually kind of cool about this is all these APIs that I'm hitting are publicly accessible. I mean, if not publicly accept, you would have to create an account with us and work with us, and we don't just offer them freely. You have to get tokens and things like that. But ultimately, we're using the same APIs customers would be using to interface with our tooling. So there's one level of protection on the front end that allows us to very quickly be able to say, hey, that's what we're dealing with, instead of having to click submit, wait for the server to tell you everything went wrong. However, if that validation failed, or you're somehow able to circumvent it, which you're more than welcome to, I mean, it's just HTML, you can go in there, disable false. So our API would then yell at you, and it would pop back a message that would say, hey, you can't actually do this thing. But most of our you can't do this thing is caught on the front end. Here's a progressive disclosure. Hey, there's a validation right there. Our backend would have yelled at you, but I'm going to say, no, I'm not going to. Each of these brings up a modal. Now, as far as how we design this modal here, or call out, or dialogue, or whatever you want to call it, we have one modal that we reuse. And when I'm clicking this, our component is ingesting which content should be produced inside. So it's the same underlying code to display this in every location. What is actually in it is then passed in at each point. Info, same sort of thing, right?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Where do you store all the information of each model? Database or JSON file?
That is hard-coded in HTML. There is something to be said. Hey, I would love to have that be a something that similar to WordPress. Anyone could go in and change, but we've decided in some instances we can deploy this whenever we want, so we can make a change if it was necessary for the business. But it actually allows, we want that change management. So for us, we don't want a CMS where anyone could go change it. Well, not anyone, but right, you can just go change it all the time. So it's both a disadvantage and an advantage at the same time that we get to control that. But yeah, it would be great if that was sitting in a database, but then you're doing database calls. When right now, this is on the browser right now, I can click it and it's instantaneous instead of let me make a database call. And we're getting, this is used by thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So if you can imagine all those database calls, it's going to get really expensive, and that's that churns our databases, and you've got to get DBAs, make the optimize the data. Gets really expensive. And like I'm talking like, when I say really expensive, not only is it expensive for developers, I'm talking you might have to spin up hundreds of computers dynamically, as when you want to do it dynamically, because it'd be expensive. It'd be even more expensive to have them just sitting there. So things to optimize database. We could do a bunch of stuff to optimize those database calls, but things to think about. So.
And does that data really change that often too, right?
No, the stuff that does change, absolutely. Like this, this is stuff that is going to change pretty often. That one is going to get populated by CMS. Hey, we lost all of our content. Woohoo! Oops. There's a feature that's coming out soon that will fix that. Cool. All right, so we got dimensions, we've got weight, 7,000, because that's cool. 100, 100. Nope. Hey, look, validations. It's a thing. These validations are happening, I'm trying to think of anything. So we're using RxJS, which uses observables, which getting a little bit technical, but basically we set up watchers that watch these inputs, and based on what's in these inputs, it will trigger off logic to do checks and ultimately validate or invalidate inputs. So that's what we're using under the hood there. We can get into RxJS for days. Other things we're doing, we want to do some more front-end logic. If I'm doing our instant guaranteed service, we're going to disable some things. We can't do inbound for that. What is some of the other ones? Anyway, you can kind of disable and enable some things. But that's all happening in line, so we're watching these. This is a plug-and-play library from Google that allows me to say, I'm not a robot, and it ultimately does a thing. When we get the quote, we're making an API call that ultimately has a bunch of information in it. And then we're getting a response back. That response has in it 2 objects. No, oh, I selected guaranteed, so it's just one. So this is going to be the guaranteed service. This is a card, which in itself is a component with multiple components inside it. We've got kind of the center component here, which we can dynamically interchange. I don't know if you recall in the last, kind of when we were looking at this before, we had multiple cards. Now we just have one. Trying to think anything else fancy about this. Download is an API call. We're basically going to send data from this quote to a service, which will then create a PDF, which we will be able to use. Did something fancy where you can basically say, hey, I want this shipment. Can I rate another one with exactly that same thing? And what we're doing there is we're stowing that information in a temporary place. And based on this quote at the top, within our query, we're able to then re-ingest that quote inside of this. So we're just using routing here, just simple routing. It's kind of the bare bones of this thing without getting too boring. Thoughts, concerns, cons? Yeah.
That, like the zip code API thing, is that written by your company, that API, or is that like a third party thing?
That's our company.
Okay,
yep.
Cool.
Everything goes through us, and there are, actually even this postal code lookup is us.
Okay, cool.
We're big enough that we usually want control of these things. It sounds crazy to think, well, why wouldn't you use some third party?
That way you get like the perfect data, I guess values in your database, and you're not,
and there's also there's limitations that you have as a public company, and there's audits that you have to do, and I can't speak to all the security things that we deal with on a daily basis. That's why there's another team that thinks of those for us. But by having it in-house and actually even on premises, we're able to control exactly what that looks like. So there's a lot of reasons why we go everything internal. Ultimately, it makes it more affordable for us.
Yeah. Do you use a design system within inside of the dev teams, or are you not there yet?
Right now, we're using Angular material.
Okay.
Are we, potentially going other places in different directions? That's for our design teams to sort, and we'll implement whatever they tell us.
Right. I meant like reusable components that one team has developed.
Yeah, so what we're transitioning to right now is basically having a core system where this select search for postal code is one component. We're actually then going to take this component identically and plop it in our libraries that any of our apps could use. We're building lots of reusable tools. In fact, can I be devious? We use this pricing breakdown in so many places. Same component, it's just pulled from our library of components that we have, and we just are plopping into it an object that it wants to look like. And we use TypeScript, which forces us to type, which is amazing. So at the compile time, it yells at us if data doesn't look the right way, which is amazing. So JavaScript is wonderful, but it lacks typing, and TypeScript forces that typing on you, and I can't recommend it enough.
Data typing.
Data typing.
Yeah.
No. And ultimately, it's a compile time, not in runtime. Pardon?
So they all require typing.
Yes. The caveat to TypeScript is it's on runtime, it's not typed. It's just on compile, so you could actually yell at it and say, no, I think I know what I'm doing, and it'll still fall over, but it's amazing. question over here, yeah.
Is there a reason why you use Angular instead of React?
There's lots of reasons. I wasn't in that decision, so I can't speak exactly to what it is. I can speak to React being a great tool for building a lot of small things that would need to interact with each other but might be in different places. And if you think of like the Facebook homepage or your news feed, all of those are tiny little React apps basically. And our system, as you can see here, this isn't, it's a big flow. And this app, and it looks really, really simple. I'm not logged in, so there's a lot of stuff that isn't here. We're doing a lot of really, really, really complicated things that we want in one single place, which you can totally do in React. You could do everything we're doing here in React. But Angular felt better. And sometimes in this, we can get in and spike and generate feelings, but it's geared more towards enterprise, building enterprise tools, building tools that need to have these components that you can put in different places. And while React absolutely does the exact same thing, the tooling that we're able to use here and have it all in one place and very opinionated. That's one thing about Angular. And we go one step further and have a library on top of Angular that forces yet even more constraints on how we're building our applications, which things go in different libraries and how those look is very, very enforced. And React is much more freeform. You can do those things, but we just didn't see the tooling in place for it. And again, I'm sure that if someone was writing this in React, would come up and they'd say basically the exact inverse or something like that, and they could argue why you would use React here. Ultimately, it came down to that's the decision we made, and our entire company is there. And consistency is better than the best tool. So that's ultimately some of the reasons why. But I wasn't in the decision. These are just kind of the things I've seen after the fact. I love Angular. The tooling's great. The Angular CLI is fantastic. It reminds me a lot of Ember these days, and I loved Ember because it was super opinionated. I love opinionated code bases. I love being told what to do. I love directing. And we use tools that allow, like for instance, semicolons. Do you want to write a semicolon? We don't care. We enforce it, but we actually don't care. When you commit your code to our code base, it'll add the semicolon for you. So we use tools within the Angular ecosystem, and we bring in other tools as well. That one's prettier that will do that. You can do whatever you want to do. We'll just force it into the framework that we want it in using tooling.
So CLI, command line interface, and Ember is what, Peter?
Ember is an Angular or React type thing. It's a JavaScript framework. I don't have that backpack with me, but yeah, it's I believe actually Angular built their command line interface off of Ember's command line interface. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the most frustrating thing about being a web developer?
Gosh.
Stump the chump.
So I could do the obvious. Internet Explorer can be really, really, really angering and frustrating. Oftentimes, Internet Explorer forces me to write better code, which I like. When you have a bug in Firefox, you're actually, oh hey, they're forcing me to write against the actual spec instead of Google allowing me to be a little bit flamboyant in how I write my code. So it's super frustrating to write for Internet Explorer because you might be sitting on a bug, or you might have to realize I have to refactor this entire thing and do it differently. So Internet Explorer can be really frustrating. I think right now, some of my biggest frustrations have just been getting tooling set up. You'll sit there, you might have a package. Are you familiar with NPM packages, bringing packages in and bringing them into your tooling?
Some people.
Okay, so when we build out a project, back in the day, you used to write an index.html file. You would include a .js file. You would include a .css file. That was what you did. Super simple. And when you moved your JavaScript file, you would then change how it was referenced in the HTML. And while it was super verbose and complicated, if you wanted to do larger sites, it was really simple, and it always worked. Always worked. Now we're doing tree shaking, where we say, hey, this certain module isn't actually present on the page right now. I'm going to intelligently not put that down the wire, from the server to the client, because I want to save on bandwidth, which is great. But you're sitting there looking at a bug going, what the flipper is? Why will it not find this reference? It's in my code. It says right there, this module's here, and somehow in the tooling, on save or something like that, or when it compiled, it just like something went wrong, and it's kind of this black box of, well, it's Webpack. Maybe it's here. Let me just like restart and kill my node modules, which is where all those packages ultimately live, and maybe it'll work, and it does. Oh my gosh! I spent an entire day working on that, and all I had to do was rebuild my node modules. So I think tooling is what frustrates me the most right now. It's great to have modular things. Like we bring in, let's say if you want to, well, like for instance this, right? Like you can bring this tool, loss grid into your code base, and it does a thing that you don't have to write, and that's awesome, but it's ultimately you're relying on me as the loss grid developer to not screw you over. And sometimes by accident, you do get messed up. And that is really hard, especially when you have thousands, I don't honestly know how many packages we have, but I know I've worked on sites that have had like well into 10 to 15,000 packages in their code base that they're building. And that's a lot of risk, and that's a lot of randomly your build fails, and you have no idea why. Well, it's because so you installed cool package 1, and it required cool package 2, which required cool package 3, and cool package 3 did a bad thing and changed something that broke their API, and ultimately cool package 2 didn't hard code the version number, so it just grabbed the next version, and cool package 2 is now falling over because new cool package 3 fell over because of a version mismatch, or not a version, but because they broke something in a version that you're getting that you didn't even specify. And you're sitting there, why the heck is cool package 3 breaking? What is cool package 3? I have no idea what this thing is. And you're sitting there scrambling, and finally you realize, oh, it's because cool package 2 is requiring it. So what you can do is you can and you can actually then go in and like fix, and those are the things that you're like, it's not even my code. So,
were you the speaker last year who spoke about that one node package that got removed?
LeftPad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk about that for a second.
Yeah. It can't happen anymore. Node or npm, which is there's basically a single source of truth for npm modules, which are these small packages that you bring into your JavaScript projects. They don't allow this anymore. So I know it's Halloween, but you can sleep well tonight knowing this won't happen to you anymore. Other things will happen, but not this. This developer that wrote this line of this package called LeftPad, which basically added padding to the left of your lines. It was super simple. I think it was only a couple of lines. Figuratively speaking, it may have been 50 or 60. But so many packages used it because it was super handy, and it was like, I don't want to write this code. I'm just wanting to use this package, and I'm saying so many. I'm meaning like basically the entire internet used this package. Without knowing that they used this package, because they probably relied on Angular or something like that, which used this package. The developer who wrote this package also wrote other packages, and there was a licensing dispute with one of his other packages because the open source, you have licenses basically saying you can use this, you can't sue me if it falls over and breaks your leg. It's up to you to make sure that it's not going to blow anything up, and sorry, security is all on you. I'm just offering it to you for free. And there's various forms of licensing, and some licenses need attribute. You can get into licensing. He had a licensing dispute with something he was working on, and ultimately he was forced to take that down. And it was a mess, and poor chap. But he was just too worried that he didn't want to run into licensing issues with anything else. So he said, all my packages, I don't want them out there anymore. And so when this person started installing packages for their application, suddenly it fell over because it can't get LeftPad. Like, why is this? And that was at 2:44 in the morning, and all it took was later on in the day, everyone is freaking out because oftentimes where my local box might have all these packages installed, but whenever I submit my code for review or I push my code up to our servers, we actually run builds on those on servers. So actually when we're deploying, it's not from our machine, it's from a server that's pristine, and we know exactly what it looks like, we know what version it is, but it ultimately doesn't have those node modules sitting on it because it was going to get the latest every time. And it tried to get those, and so all the build systems were falling over because they can't get this package, and nothing's building because everyone required it. And by the middle of the day, this is bad news bears. Sites that are out are fine because they're deployed and they've got this compiled in. That's fine, or transpiled in if you want to get nitpicky. But you couldn't deploy any software. We couldn't deploy any code unless you had caches, which caching. Yay. What is it? There's 3 problems in code. It's like naming, caching, and no, there's 2 problems in code: naming, caching, and you can't count. Something like that. It's a bad joke. But yeah, it was awful, and it was because everyone relied on this third party to provide them very simple line of code. And that's the risk you take when you have open source. Ultimately, NPM realized, oh crap, like the world is falling over. What the heck do we do? I can't remember how it was resolved. I think someone else actually put a clone up, basically. Here it is, I have it. Hold on, here. Because it's open source, you can totally do this. They created they either had a fork or something like that. They published it and created a new npm package. So it was like, then it was like, left pad, here's the actual one that works, and doesn't kill your build. And everyone started installing that one, and suddenly everything was kind of, right. And so that was a scary tale of a while ago. What was some? NPM went down once. That was really bad. No packages could get installed. It was only for a couple seconds, but it was enough to cause a blip. Other questions? Yeah.
What degrees do you have?
Next question. Can I talk about it? I don't have any degrees.
No.
Yeah. I School of Hard Knocks. I would have loved to got a degree, but circumstances, and I just couldn't. And then I never got back to it. Yeah, and I didn't have a professor like Bruce.
Brownie points acknowledged.
Yeah.
So when you were getting started, what's your most memorable help wanted kind of question that you sort of helped out with?
With LostGrid. It wasn't actually help wanted, but I installed LostGrid when I wasn't even contributing to it. I was just using it. This was back in its early inception. And there was a warning that basically said that this API that it was using was deprecated, or was going to be deprecated soon. Please fix it. And everyone was getting this that was installing it. The main package that it depended on was nice enough to have a warning that says, hey, by the way, the next version, this will be deprecated. Here's how you fix it. Here's the blog post. And I saw that, and I was like, hey, I can do something about that. It basically explicitly said, change, I think it was like change 4 to 4in. Super simple. Like, that's a find and replace. Don't find and replace. But that's all it was. And I was like, well, okay, I can do this. I think I had written some documentation, I had fixed some documentation before, but and we can probably actually find it. That'd be interesting. How long ago was that? But yeah, let's see, it's gonna be on another page. But yeah, I was like, well, hey, that's a thing I can do, and ultimately I was able to do it. All the tests passed, which that's another thing we can get into test coverage. And the main contributor was like, hey, that's cool, thank you for doing that, and merged it in. The next version had my fix in it. And after that, I was kind of addicted. I was like, well, there's this other thing. I hated LostGrid. That's why I actually really started contributing, because it was buggy. It had all sorts of issues with it, and I was super frustrated. Why do I have to use this thing when someone else on my team required us to use it? At that point, I was just like, well, okay, I've got a couple of options. I can either fix it or I can keep complaining. So I complained for a bit longer, and then I started fixing things after my wife got mad at me. My wife has encouraged me to do so many things that are good for me. And that's kind of how it got started, and ultimately now I'm the main person for it, which is really cool. Hey, where is it? It's close, it's here, we're getting there. Maybe, hey, there it is, there's my first one. Replaces, there it is, remove self with remove, right? It's like, wasn't 4in, but look at the files change. I did a thing! That was my first commit into LostGrid. And that's all I did. I mean, you can tell, like, that was super simple, and it was super well defined how to fix it, and I did it, and all the tests passed. And that's the cool thing about doing open source projects. Most of the time, they have test coverage to make sure that you don't fall over. And ultimately, if you do fall over, dare I say, it's kind of like on them, like, and you help them find the hole that they then need to patch with tests. But yeah.
What's the date on that?
Let's see, September 15th, 2015.
Okay, I'll send you a card next year.
It's been a while that I've been doing this. I think it's been like 3 years. Anyway.
If you hadn't have done that, what would you have done? What do you think would have been another project?
I don't know. Probably. This is it. Honestly, this was just it kind of fell in my lap, and then I think it was like Christmas Day. He emails me like, "Dude, like I'm kind of over this. Do you want it?" My first response was, "I'll think about it." I went to talk to my wife, and she's like, "Think about what? Like, what are the downsides?" So I replied back and said, "Yep." And next thing I know, I have the repo.
So what are some of the good sides? Like these are all the people here are students, right?
Yeah.
Like what has this done for you as a web development professional that you didn't have without it?
What I didn't have without it is a resume that I can get interviewed without ever knowing the company is interviewing me. I shall demonstrate. One, they're able to tell that I'm very busy right now because I haven't gotten to these. However, let's see if we can find one in here. You want to know how I treat people? This is a bug report. Super nicely organized because I built in this organization so they can automatically see this, like, is this a feature or a bug report? Like, that's all me. I put all this templating together, so all they have to do is fill in a few things. So this is a person that had an issue. They don't have any steps, but they're able to give me some information. Here's how I responded to it. And they're able to see, here's how I am answering issues. So when QA says we found a bug, like, you can see I'm pretty verbose. I'm clear. My sentences are well laid out. You can read this. I also don't use too big of words because one thing this has taught me is how to interact with people from different regions in the world or don't even speak English as their first language. And so you can see right here, how I'd respond to that. And here's other people, commenting. Here's, what was this? I replied back on August 31st. So a few days later, it's like, hey, have you seen this? So people can see I follow up on things. This, if I'm a manager looking at this, it's like, hey, this Peter guy is a pretty cool guy. And we're starting to get some conversations, and hey, that got there, and hey, I'm super open to people calling me out on my crap. Like, hey, glad it's not an issue, but if it is, like, reopen this, and they can also then see that I'm very organized, and I'm able to document that this is a bug citing, but works as expected, and needs and doesn't need more info anymore. And they know exactly which component it's in, and so you can like, whoa, what? This is great. And let's take a look at some things that I've accepted, or let's see, boom, hey, cool. Here's something that I rejected ultimately, right? So how do I reject people? You can say here, like, hey. I'm super, and I'm buttering myself up here, but you can imagine this is a company, I'm person from company X, and I'm looking into Peter Ramsing as a guy that I might want to hire. They do not have to ask me, how do I deal with conflict? When, you can take a look at this and be like, hey, here's how I actually dealt with rejecting someone's code, et cetera, et cetera. You can actually dive in here, and I think I have a list of ones where people are cursing me out. And it's actually, people ask me, how do you deal with conflict? It's like, here's how I deal with conflict, and here's how I resolved it. And so that is something that has set me apart. And to be perfectly honest, having this in my name and saying, hey, there's 75,000 downloads a month. I know that's something that, not everyone can get there. But you know what? You can contribute to it and contribute a bit more to it. Get yourself on the core maintainer list. It's not your package necessarily, but you can absolutely say, I'm a core maintainer, or I've contributed to projects that have 75,000 downloads a month. You can't disagree with that, because when I say contributors and I see the changes that you've done, it's right there, and it's very, very clear.
And how many contributors are on that project?
26 right now.
Okay. How many when you started?
3, I think. It was Corey. Neil, and Leston.
And do you collaborate with them outside of GitHub?
Now I do. I'll email them and talk to them a little bit here and there.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm great. Like, I've gotten to be really good friends with Corey. I don't know if he'd say the same thing, but I feel like we're on good terms, and we've had really hard conversations where, after he handed it over, he had a hard time. It was my baby now. Like, I own this thing. I made different decisions than him. He's definitely one of those where his desk would have tons of stuff on it, and my desk is like, computer, spot for coffee that says coffee mug goes here. Like, very organized. So we had a lot of headbutting, but not only did that teach me how to interact with people in a remote setting, because all this was remote. I've never met these people in real life, except for there was one person that came up to me and said, "You're the Lost Screen guy." And I said, "Oh, that's so cool." They're like, that was weird and really awesome. He and I, we've gone through a lot together, and it's been a really, really great relationship, both he and I. And I'd be totally lost without lost. But would I have found another? I would hope so. But in all honesty, there are huge projects like Angular Material has a fair amount of weird bugs in it that aren't that hard to solve. It's just hard for me as a developer who's using it. I don't have time. You know what? I can get around it, but you guys are sitting here with nothing but time on your hands. You think you don't. You've got tons of time on your hands, especially if you can convince Bruce that, hey, can I do this thing as an assignment? And I don't want to speak for Bruce. He can redact this in class, but I'm sure he'd be open to, hey, you want me to do this Python project? I found this Python project that I can contribute to that's a similar thing. Could I contribute this and let this be my assignment? I don't know, and probably get myself in trouble here. I will not be back next year, but you can do these things and get in on these projects, and there's so many of them that need help desperately. And you're thinking, well, it's Google. Google accepted my pull request. Like, they just did, and they like, oh yeah, no, it looks good, test pass it, go! And Angular Material now has some document, no, it was FX Layout. That was the one that I contributed to, FX Layout, which is a Google thing for doing layout and stuff.
Peter, were you going to talk about your typical day and how you set aside certain times for different things? You spoke about that last year, and that kind of resonated with a lot of people.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I thought.
Because let's see,
we've got 7 minutes.
Yeah, 7 minutes or so.
All right, cool. Can I log into my calendar? Maybe. I do what's called an ideal week. I wish I could pull it up. I don't think I can without getting into work stuff, and maybe I can. Is there like an HDMI cord?
No, go fish.
Okay. I do.
You can talk about it.
Pardon?
You could talk about it.
Yeah.
And some of the tools you used.
Yeah. So day in the life. I guess ultimately that's the title. Sorry. I get to work after writing in. I start my day by checking email and Slack, which I then promptly close because I like to be focused in the morning. Not today. Today was an off day. I usually designate my mornings for kind of my heavy lifting thinking things because that's what works for me. Your mileage may vary. I spend my Mondays building things. Within our team, I have different percentages of my time allocated, like 70% Angular developer. I do data for like 10%, and I'm a tech lead for 20%. So on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday are my build it days. So I'm working on actual issues or bugs or feature enhancements. Most of the day, I'm writing code, or not writing code right now, but either writing code or doing research or doing things to help build our products. On Tuesdays are my team lead days, so we have things like, we have a quick retrospective, which if you're familiar with Agile a little bit, basically we very quickly go over what went well last week, what went terrible last week, what are the things we want to do. So we do that on Tuesday. I usually get some blog reading in on Tuesday. I try to keep my blog reading to a minimum. Really, I like to read and get a lot of information in, but I've learned you can read a lot of different opinions that just confuse the heck out of you because you have one blog saying Angular is awesome, the other blog saying React is awesome, and you just get yourself confused. I'm a fan of getting some really good information asking a lot of questions and going. So I do that on Tuesday mornings. I read a lot of blogs. I do a little bit of experimentation. I build a lot of tooling on Tuesdays with lots of coffee. So part of my job as a tech lead is to allow us to go faster. So I build tooling that helps us do that, whether it's better tests or optimizing things. So that's kind of what my Tuesday looks like. On Friday, that's we're getting ready for our release. So we have a meeting on Thursday mornings to talk about what's in our release. Let's just make sure everyone's on board with what's in the release. We're all on the same page. What's being QA'd. I'm coordinating with QA throughout all the week as they're identifying issues that are in the tickets that I'm working on. We use Jira as our project management, but it can, your mileage may vary on what tool you're using. But the gist of it is I have a ticket. It has the description of what I need to be doing. I directly relate the branch of work I'm doing within our code base, and we use Git, so I branch off of our development branch, and I label it with that ticket in our Jira system, so they're connected. When I'm ready to QA it, we push it. It's been code reviewed at this point, which either someone on my team will do or someone external to our team will do. Sometimes we do that, we'll ship it out externally. I got 4 minutes, so we're good. 3 minutes now. And I'll do a lot of code review as well, code reviewing other people's things. I get called to other people's desks a lot to answer Internet Explorer questions or things like that. Or layout questions or Angular questions or CSS. I love CSS, so I'll answer a lot of CSS questions. And so then Friday, we're actually getting ready for the release. So sometimes I'm working on new features that'll go in next week's release, but oftentimes we're making sure that everything's in place, that all of our tests are passing, that QA is able to test everything all at once on our pre-production servers, that we have all the right tags in place, because we have really extensive change management. So we have change numbers with all the details of what's going in, so making sure that everything's tagged so that on Sunday morning when we actually release our code, everything's wired up and all the paperwork is in order. So I spend lots of Friday doing that, along with just helping make sure that our QA has everything they need, and writing a little bit of code, and then doing a lot of data work. So we do a lot of data, figuring out how people are using our applications, so that we can better optimize it. Oh, hey, no one ever clicks this button. Can they not see it? Do they not know what it means? Or do they just not need to send this to someone in Zimbabwe named Chuck who will then review it? No one cares that Chuck reviews this thing. Okay, we don't need to work on this feature anymore.
What tool do you use to do that?
We use a combination of Google Analytics and other tools that we have internally to kind of figure out how our users are using it in a really non-creepy way. And I don't mean that sarcastically. It's we're very, very careful with our data. To do any more logging, I have to go up to information security and be like, please let me. And they say, we shall review it. And I'm really glad that they do, because they catch things that I would totally have missed. Lots of coffee, lots of talking with other developers. While I'm, one can call it a cube farm. It's actually really collaborative, but private at the same time. You can just kind of headphone in and work, or you can kind of lean over. Hey, Aaron, what you doing? Yeah, it's a bit of the day in the life. GitHub, VS Code is my code editor. We have people that use WebStorm. I like VS Code. It's pluggable. Doesn't use as much memory as WebStorm. I am on Windows now, which isn't as bad as everyone thinks it is. It's actually, I am really enjoying the Windows environment. I will be moving back to Mac just for personal preferences, and it runs OmniFocus, which is my task management tool of choice, which I guess also in my day I manage all my own personal tasks, whether it be work or actual personal things, in a separate task management tool, and I link that with my Jira tickets, just so that at any point in time, I know exactly what I need to be doing in prioritization with everything else, because I'm talking with my manager a lot about what I need to be doing, because I'm working on so many different projects in different places that one Jira project can't capture that. So I have a lot of templates in my OmniFocus that allow me to see exactly what I need to be doing based on which meeting I'm in and things like that. So everything's smeared over in there. Yeah.
How big's your team?
How big's my team? My team is about 10 people with several offshore. We coordinate with 400 to 1,000 plus. Anything else? Yeah.
How many developers do you have in your team?
On my team, about 9.
So what's that one guy?
Management.
Okay.
Well, and we have management, we have BA. I'm running these numbers off the top of my head. I'm like, hold on.
Yeah.
It's hard. Wait, why can't I count to 10? I don't know. It's, about there. Well, we have people kind of flexing in and out as well. But yeah, we've got BA, we've got technical support. They don't write code, but they deploy code. Management, technical support. QA writes a lot of automation scripts, so they do write a lot of code, but not our frontline code that's actually being deployed. BA, we have Martin. Yeah, it's like defined team. Like, I don't know, my team is 480 people because I require we cannot do what we do without them. So, but yeah, most everyone's writing code. Front end, we have 2.5 developers on front end. I think 2 now actually.
2.5.
Some people write both back end, front end, and half time. And technically, I'm not full time. I'm not a full time developer. I'm 70% developer. So, yeah. Is that?
So a new guy coming in, what kind of frameworks do you expect him to know?
Character, communication, asking good questions.
We've heard this before.
Listening.
Yeah.
Familiarity with MVC.
Model view controller.
Yeah, model view control, and even just more like, okay, I understand, like, you might have this piece that talks to this piece. Being familiar with componentization, I want to build really small components. Like, I want this here to be a component that even has in it another component that this is another component that you can reuse and put. So an understanding of that. Teachable, humble, good conversationalist, team player. You said what framework you want to be familiar with?
Well,
I'm sorry, I'm playing on you.
Yeah.
I don't really care. I'll teach you whatever you want. Like, if you came in and was an Angular expert up the wazoo, but were a jerk, we're not having you on our team.
that
So.
seems unusual because like a lot of other places, they want you to know. Before they will call you back, they want you to know this whole, this list of things.
Yeah, and we're kind of going over, so I don't know if you want to close and we can do offline questions.
You can answer that question. That would be great.
And let me, before we totally forget, okay.
And
no, I totally missed questions in here.
Oh wow.
Okay. If you're applying to a team that wants Angular experience, and you're competing with someone who has a bunch of Angular experience and is also awesome, you should probably have Angular experience. Otherwise, no, you're not going to get the job. You have no Angular experience. This one does. You're both awesome. If you're looking for Angular jobs, you want to have Angular experience. If you're looking for React jobs, you want to have React experience. If you're looking for Angular jobs, but you have React experience, well, talk about components and how you could leverage this. In all honesty, you can pick up Angular in a weekend. If you have a good understanding of how to code, good practices, and have ask good questions, and can read a couple of posts that have a couple of Kickstarters. CLI builds out everything. You don't need to know how it's organized, especially if you're coming in as a junior. If you're coming in as like a senior or a principal developer, different story. But you said new person coming in. I'm looking. We're discussing the potential interns. I honestly want someone who is able to listen, can be intelligent and ask good questions and be a problem solver. I don't care if they know Angular. I can teach them Angular in a weekend. That's like, and I'll a day's investment on teaching them Angular and they're flying. There's a lot of things that go into it, but React, I can teach you these things. And
Fundamentals,
I don't really care.
fundamentals.
It's all about fundamentals, and that's like, some companies are looking for Angular, some companies are looking for React. These days, it's probably going to be one or the other. Could be Ember, could be Vue. Vue is another one that lots of people are using.
So many.
But yeah, man, if you've got good principles and can speak to them, I can interview someone for an Angular position and know super quick whether or not they're going to get it, or whether or not they're going to get Angular. And if you understand your principles and you listen to your professor, brownie points. You'll have those principles and you'll have the tools to understand how to use these frameworks. But it doesn't hurt to spin up a project here or there. React can be spun up really quick. Angular can be spun up really quick. I'm not familiar with Vue very much. Ember can be spun really quick. Play around, and you'll be able to speak to a lot of things.
Build.
How big is your team? Great, we got that one. How many languages framework do you expect? I sort of.
That's that.
Oh, cool. Do you work with UX designers? Absolutely, all the time. Yeah, they tell me what to do. I can do UX, and as a developer, you should be smart. You should look at this and go, this doesn't work very well. Oftentimes, the designer will give me something, and I'll build it out and be like, actually, this plays really weird, and we'll have a back and forth. But at the same time, I want to let them do the research, let them make all the good decisions on why it should be this way, because sometimes I don't have the context they have.
Are there any other questions for Peter today before we all go home and go trick-or-treating, right?
And you can always get a hold of me there.
Go home and lock the doors.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Peter.